What if I told you that one of the world's wealthiest men spent 3 years in a coma, declared dead by his own family, while a conspiracy worth billions unfolded around his hospital bed? This is the story of Victor Blackstone, a man whose fortune became his curse, whose silence became his salvation, and whose nurse became his only hope for justice. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't money or influence. It's simply the truth. Before we dive into this incredible tale of deception, betrayal, and redemption, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Drop a comment below and tell me which city you're watching from. It's amazing to connect with people from all around the world who love these kinds of stories as much as I do. Now let's begin. The rain hammered against the windows of Blackstone, tower like bullets against bulletproof glass. On the 47th floor, Victor Blackstone stood in his corner office, staring out at the city he had helped build. At 62, he was worth $12 billion, controlled 17 companies across 4 continents, and commanded respect from world leaders and business titans alike. Yet tonight, he felt more alone than he had ever felt in his life. His reflection in the rain-streaked glass showed a man who had aged beyond his years. Silver hair, once perfectly styled, now hung disheveled across his forehead. His steel-blue eyes, legendary for their ability to read people's intentions, were clouded with exhaustion and something else, something that looked almost like fear. Victor had built his empire from nothing. An orphan who had clawed his way out of poverty, he had learned early that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. But now, as he faced the biggest crisis of his career, he was beginning to suspect that his greatest enemies weren't his business, rivals or government regulators. They were much closer to home. The merger deal with Titan Industries was supposed to be his masterpiece, a $20 billion acquisition that would cement his legacy as one of the greatest business minds of his generation. But strange things had been happening. Documents were disappearing from his safe. Confidential meetings were being leaked to the press. His own board members were questioning his decisions in ways they never had before. And then there were the accidents. The elevator that had mysteriously malfunctioned when he was the only one scheduled to use it. The car that had developed brake problems on a mountain road. The food poisoning that had left him hospitalized for 3 days. Each incident could be explained away as coincidence. But Victor hadn't survived in the business world for 40 years by believing in coincidences. He turned away from the window and walked to his desk, where a single manila folder lay waiting. Inside were private investigator reports that had cost him $500,000 and taken 6 months to compile. The contents made his blood run cold. His younger brother Marcus, his trusted CFO of 15 years, his nephew Bradley, groomed since childhood to take over the company, his personal assistant Sarah, who had been with him for a decade and knew every detail of his business operations. They were all involved. All of them had been systematically working to undermine him, to position themselves to take control when he was gone. The evidence was overwhelming: secret meetings, offshore accounts, forged documents, bribes to board members. It was a conspiracy that had been years in the making, and it was almost ready to be executed. Victor's hands trembled as he closed the folder. These weren't just business associates plotting against him. These were the people he had considered family. Marcus, who he had pulled out of debt and given a second chance. Bradley, who he had mentored and protected like his own son. Sarah, who knew his habits, his schedule, his vulnerabilities better than anyone. The worst part was the plan itself. They weren't just going to push him out or force him into retirement. According to the investigators' reports, they were planning something far more permanent. The accidents hadn't been random. They had been practice runs, test cases to see if they could eliminate him without suspicion. Victor reached for his secure phone to call his lawyer, but then he hesitated. Who could he trust? His legal team had been handpicked by Marcus. His security detail reported to Sarah. His board of directors included 3 members who, according to the investigation, had already been compromised. For the first time in his adult life, Victor Blackstone felt truly powerless. He decided to leave the office immediately and drive to his estate in the mountains, where he could think clearly and plan his next move. The storm was getting worse. But he needed to get away from the city, away from the people who wanted him dead. As he gathered his things, Victor made one crucial decision. He would not run. He would not hide. He would fight back, but he would do it smart. Tomorrow he would begin documenting everything, creating a paper trail that would expose the conspiracy and protect his legacy. But tonight he just needed to survive. The mountain road was treacherous in good weather, and tonight it was a death trap. Victor's hands gripped the steering wheel of his Range Rover as he navigated the winding curves, his headlights cutting through the rain and fog like weak swords against the darkness. He should have waited until morning. He should have taken his security detail. But paranoia had taken hold, and he couldn't shake the feeling that every minute he stayed in the city brought him closer to danger. The conspiracy was moving forward, and he needed time to figure out how to stop it. The investigators' report had revealed the timeline. Marcus and the others were planning to make their move within the next 2 weeks. There would be another accident, but this time it would be successful. Then, with Victor out of the way, Marcus would step in as interim CEO while the will was contested. Bradley, as the designated heir, would eventually take control. But by then the company would be so thoroughly compromised that they could loot it at will. It was brilliant, really. Diabolical, but brilliant. Victor's phone buzzed with a text message. Despite the dangerous driving conditions, he glanced down at the screen. It was from Sarah, working late tonight. See you in the morning. Drive safely. The word sent a chill down his spine. How did she know he was driving anywhere? He hadn't told anyone he was leaving the office. Another message appeared. This one from Marcus. Hope you got home safely, brother. This storm is getting nasty. Victor felt his heart rate spike. They were tracking him. Somehow they knew exactly where he was and what he was doing. His phone, his car, maybe even his clothes, everything could be monitored. He was about to pull over and figure out how to disable his phone when he saw the lights in his rearview mirror. A large SUV was following him, staying exactly the same distance behind, regardless of his speed. When he slowed down, it slowed down. When he accelerated, it kept pace. Victor's mouth went dry. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't paranoia. This was really happening. He pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing the Range Rover to dangerous speeds on the slick mountain road. The SUV behind him matched his pace effortlessly. In the darkness and rain, he couldn't make out the license plate or see who was driving. But the vehicle's behavior was unmistakably threatening. A sharp curve appeared ahead, posted with warning signs for a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. Victor was doing 70. He hit the brakes hard, feeling the anti-lock system engage as the tires struggled for traction on the wet asphalt. That's when he felt it. The steering wheel wasn't responding properly. The brakes were working, but something was wrong with the steering system. The car was pulling to the right, toward the guardrail and the 100-foot drop beyond it. Victor fought with the wheel, using every ounce of his strength to keep the vehicle on the road. Behind him, the pursuing SUV had fallen back, as if the driver knew exactly what was about to happen. The Range Rover hit the guardrail at 50 miles per hour. The metal barrier, weakened by years of weather and neglect, crumpled like paper. For a terrifying moment, the vehicle teetered on the edge of the cliff, the headlights illuminating nothing but empty air and darkness. Then gravity took hold. Victor's last conscious thought, as the Range Rover tumbled into the ravine, was not about his money or his companies or his legacy. It was about the nurse who had taken care of his mother during her final illness, a kind woman named Elena, who had treated a dying stranger with more compassion than his own family had ever shown him. He wished he had been a better man. He wished he had been worthy of that kind of care. Then the darkness claimed him. Elena Rodriguez had been a nurse for 23 years, and she had learned to read the signs that others missed. The subtle changes in breathing patterns, the micro-expressions that flickered across unconscious faces, the way family members behaved when they thought no one was watching. And right now, every instinct she had developed, over 2 decades in intensive care units, was telling her that something was very, very wrong with the Victor Blackstone case. Officially, The patient in room 314 was in a medically induced coma following a catastrophic car accident 3 months ago. The billionaire had suffered massive head trauma, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding that had required 17 hours of surgery to repair. The media had reported extensively on the crash, with most outlets suggesting that even if he survived, he would never be the same man who had built a $12 billion empire. But Elena had been assigned to his care from the beginning, and she had noticed things that didn't appear in any medical chart. For one thing, his family's behavior was odd. Most relatives of coma patients maintained some kind of vigil, spending hours talking to their loved ones, holding their hands, playing familiar music or reading aloud. The Blackstone family did visit, but their visits were brief, perfunctory, and strangely businesslike. Marcus Blackstone, Victor's brother, and the interim CEO of Blackstone Industries, would arrive every few days with a briefcase and a laptop. He would pull the curtain around the bed and conduct what sounded like conference calls, discussing company business in hushed tones, while his brother lay unconscious just a few feet away. When Elena had gently suggested that he might want to spend some quiet time with Victor, Marcus had looked at her with barely concealed irritation and explained that keeping the company running was the best thing he could do for his brother. Bradley Blackstone, Victor's nephew and designated heir, was even stranger. He would stand at the foot of the bed for exactly 10 minutes, staring at his uncle with an expression that Elena couldn't quite read. It wasn't sadness or concern. It was something closer to assessment, as if he were evaluating a piece of equipment to see if it was still functional. And then there was Sarah Chen, Victor's personal assistant, who had taken on many of the responsibilities of managing his personal affairs. She visited twice a week, always carrying a thick folder of documents that required Victor's signature. Elena had watched her carefully position Victor's unconscious hand to make thumbprints and even attempt to guide his fingers to hold a pen, all while explaining to Elena that these were routine matters that couldn't wait. But the thing that disturbed Elena most was the medication orders. Dr. Harrison Webb, Victor's primary physician and a longtime family friend, had prescribed an unusual combination of sedatives and anti-seizure medications that Elena had never seen used in a case like this. When she had questioned the dosages, which seemed excessive for a patient who was already in a medically induced coma, Dr. Webb had curtly reminded her that he had been practicing medicine for 30 years and didn't need nursing advice. Elena had worked with Dr. Webb before, and this wasn't like him. He was normally a collaborative physician who welcomed input from experienced nurses, but whenever she raised questions about Victor's care, he became defensive and dismissive. More troubling still, the medication orders kept changing in subtle ways. Every few days, Dr. Webb would adjust the dosages or add new drugs to the regimen, always with explanations that sounded plausible but didn't quite make sense given Victor's stable condition. Elena had been a nurse long enough to recognize the signs of deliberate overmedication. She had seen cases where unscrupulous family members or medical professionals had used drugs to keep patients sedated beyond what was medically necessary, usually to maintain control over their finances or medical decisions. But this was different. This felt like something much worse. It was on a Tuesday night shift, 3 months after Victor's accident, that Elena finally heard what she had been unconsciously waiting for. She was adjusting Victor's IV line when she heard him whisper, so softly that she almost missed it, "Help me." Elena froze, her hands still on the tubing. Coma patients sometimes made sounds, reflexive moans or gasps that were involuntary responses to stimulus. But this had been different. This had been intentional. She leaned closer to Victor's face. His eyes were still closed, but she could see rapid eye movement beneath his lids, and his breathing pattern had changed. "Mr. Blackstone?" she whispered. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, his right hand moved, just a twitch of his index finger, but Elena was certain it was deliberate. She looked around the ICU to make sure no one was watching, then took his hand in hers. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand," she said quietly. The response was immediate. Victor's fingers tightened around hers with surprising strength. Eleanor's heart began to race. This wasn't a reflexive response. Victor Blackstone was conscious. He was aware. And if he was asking for help, that meant he was in danger. She knew she should call Dr. Webb immediately and report the change in Victor's condition. That was protocol, but something about the desperation in that whispered "help me" made her hesitate. Instead, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm going to help you," she whispered back. "But you need to trust me, and we need to be very careful." Victor's hand squeezed hers again, and Elena knew that she had just committed herself to uncovering a truth that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. Elena had always been methodical, and now that methodical nature might save Victor's life. Over the next 2 weeks, she began to carefully document everything she observed during her shifts. She noted the exact timing of family visits, photographed medication orders with her phone, and kept detailed records of Victor's responses to stimulus. What she discovered was a pattern that chilled her to the bone. Victor was most responsive during the overnight shifts when fewer staff members were present and family visits were restricted. During day shifts, when Dr. Webb made his rounds and family members were more likely to visit, Victor showed no signs of consciousness at all. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental. Elena realized that Victor was being kept in a chemically induced coma through carefully timed medication doses. The drugs Dr. Webb was prescribing weren't treating any medical condition. They were ensuring that Victor remained unconscious and helpless, while his family systematically dismantled his empire. But the most shocking discovery came when Elena decided to research Victor's accident more thoroughly. Using her home computer, she pulled up news reports from the night of the crash. The official story was that Victor had been driving too fast in dangerous weather conditions and had lost control of his vehicle on a mountain curve. The investigating officers had noted that the guardrail showed signs of recent impact, and Victor's blood alcohol level was within legal limits, ruling out impaired driving. But one detail in a brief follow-up article caught Elena's attention. The towing company that had recovered Victor's Range Rover from the ravine had reported unusual damage to the vehicle's steering system. According to their report, the power steering fluid reservoir had been completely empty, and there were signs that the fluid lines had been deliberately cut. The article mentioned that police had investigated the possibility of mechanical sabotage but had concluded that the damage was likely caused by the crash itself. The case had been closed within a week. Eleanor sat in her apartment, staring at the screen. As the full scope of what she was dealing with became clear, Victor's accident hadn't been an accident at all. Someone had sabotaged his car, expecting him to die in the crash. When he had survived, they had shifted to a different plan, keeping him comatose while they positioned themselves to inherit his fortune. It was attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud on a massive scale. Elena knew she was in over her head, but she also knew that she might be the only person who could save Victor's life. She began to formulate a plan, but first, she needed to establish better communication with her patient. The next night, during her shift, Eleanor waited until the ICU was quiet before approaching Victor's bed. "Mr. Blackstone," she whispered, "I know you're awake. I know what they're doing to you. If you can understand me, squeeze my hand once for yes, twice for no." Victor's response was immediate, one firm squeeze. "Are you in pain?" 2 squeezes, "No." "Do you know who is doing this to you?" 1 squeeze, "Yes." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "Is it your family?" 1 squeeze. "Your brother Marcus?" 1 squeeze. "Your nephew Bradley?" 1 squeeze. "Dr. Webb?" 1 squeeze. Elena sat back, overwhelmed by the confirmation of her worst fears. The conspiracy included Victor's own physician, which explained how they had been able to maintain the elaborate charade for so long. "I'm going to get you out of here," she whispered. "But I need evidence. Can you tell me where I might find proof of what they're doing?" Victor's hand moved in what Eleanor realized was an attempt to point. She followed the direction and saw that he was indicating the laptop bag that Marcus always carried during his visits. "His laptop?" 1 squeeze. "What about your home or office?" Victor squeezed once, then moved his hand again, this time making a motion that Elena interpreted as writing. Papers, documents? One squeeze. Elena understood. Victor had discovered the conspiracy before his accident and had gathered evidence. The proof was somewhere in his personal files, but she would need access to places that were undoubtedly under the control of the very people who were trying to kill him. This was when Elena made the most dangerous decision of her life. "I'm going to help you escape," she told Victor. "But first we need to make them think you're getting worse, not better. Can you pretend to be completely unresponsive when they're around?" One squeeze. "And we need to find that evidence. Do you have somewhere safe where you might have hidden important documents?" Victor's hand moved again, and this time Elena could swear he was tracing letters against her palm. She concentrated, trying to interpret the movements. Elena, her own name. She looked at him in confusion. "I don't understand. What about Elena?" Victor continued tracing letters. Mother. Elena's breath caught. Victor was referring to her mother, who had been a patient at this same hospital 3 years ago. Elena had been her primary nurse during her final weeks of life, and she remembered Victor visiting his mother in the room next door. But what could that have to do with hidden documents? Then Victor traced one more word. SAFE. Elena's mind raced. Victor's mother had died around the same time as her own mother. If Victor had been planning for the possibility of betrayal even then, he might have used Elena's mother's room or belongings to hide something. But that seemed impossible. Elena's mother had been a retired schoolteacher with no connection to the Blackstone family beyond. Being in the same hospital wing, unless... Elena remembered something that had puzzled her at the time. A few days before her mother died, she had mentioned that the nice man next door had asked her to hold on to an envelope for safekeeping. Elena had assumed it was some kind of personal letter or memento, and after her mother's death, she had simply packed all of her belongings without looking through them carefully. The envelope might still be in her mother's things, boxed up in Elena's apartment. "Did you give my mother something to keep safe?" Elena whispered. One squeeze. Elena felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. If Victor had hidden evidence with her mother, and if that evidence was still in Elena's possession, she might have the proof needed to expose the conspiracy and save Victor's life. But she also knew that once she took action, there would be no going back. Victor's family had already proven they were willing to commit murder to protect their scheme. If they discovered that Elena knew the truth, she would become their next target. Elena looked down at the unconscious billionaire, this man who had entrusted his life to her care, and made her choice. "Tomorrow is my night off," she whispered. "I'm going to find that evidence, and then we're going to stop them." Elena's mother had been a pack rat, saving everything from birthday cards to grocery receipts with the conviction that you never know when you might need it. After her death, Elena had boxed up her belongings and stored them in her apartment's spare bedroom, unable to bring herself to sort through a lifetime of memories. Now, as she searched through those boxes by lamplight, Elena felt like she was disturbing sacred ground. But somewhere in this collection of faded photographs, knitting patterns, and recipe cards might be the key to saving Victor's life. She found the envelope in a shoebox, filled with her mother's jewelry and personal mementos. It was thick manila envelope, sealed with tape and labeled in her mother's careful handwriting. For Elena, from the nice man in room 316. Room 316 had been Victor's mother's room. Elena's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside she found a USB drive, a handwritten letter, and copies of financial documents that made her stomach turn. The letter was addressed to her personally. "Dear Elena, if you are reading this, then my suspicions about my family were correct, and I'm either dead or incapacitated. I watched how you cared for your mother with such devotion, and I knew that if anyone could be trusted with the truth, it would be you. I have discovered that my brother Marcus, my nephew Bradley, and several associates have been planning to remove me from control of my company, through any means necessary, including murder. The USB drive contains recorded conversations, financial records, and email exchanges that prove their involvement in a conspiracy to kill me and steal my fortune." I have also discovered that Dr. Webb, who has been our family physician for many years, is involved in their plan. If something happens to me, he will likely be the one responsible for ensuring that I never recover. I know this is an enormous burden to place on someone who barely knows me, but I have nowhere else to turn. Everyone I trusted has betrayed me. You are my only hope for justice. If you are reading this, please take the evidence to District Attorney Patricia Morrison. She is one of the few public officials I am certain cannot be bought. Tell her everything, and make sure she understands that my life may still be in danger. I am sorry to involve you in this nightmare, but thank you for being the kind of person who can be trusted when it matters most. Sincerely, Victor Blackstone. Eleanor stared at the letter for a long moment, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility that Victor had placed on her. Then she inserted the USB drive into her laptop and began to review the evidence. What she found was damning beyond anything she could have imagined. There were audio recordings of Marcus and Bradley discussing the best methods for staging Victor's death, email exchanges with a private investigator who had been hired to monitor Victor's movements and identify opportunities for accidents, financial records showing payments to Dr. Webb for services that were never specified but coincided perfectly with changes in Victor's medication regimen. Most chilling of all was a recorded phone conversation between Marcus and someone identified only as the mechanic, discussing the sabotage of Victor's Range Rover. The recording was crystal clear, with Marcus explaining that the crash needed to look accidental and the mechanic providing detailed instructions on how to cut the power steering lines in a way that would cause catastrophic failure on a mountain curve. Eleanor realized she was looking at evidence of premeditated murder, and the victim was lying helpless in a hospital bed just a few miles away, still in danger every moment she delayed. But as she prepared to contact the district attorney, Eleanor noticed something that made her blood freeze. The most recent documents on the USB drive were dated just 2 days ago. Victor hadn't compiled this evidence months ago. He had been updating it continuously, somehow gathering new information, even while he lay unconscious in the ICU. That meant he had been awake and aware far longer than Elena had realized. It also meant that his family's plan was accelerating. According to the most recent emails, Marcus and Bradley were growing impatient with the slow progress of their scheme and were considering more direct action. Eleanor read one exchange with growing horror. Marcus, the coma has gone on too long. People are starting to ask questions about his recovery timeline. Bradley, Webb says he can't increase the sedatives any further without risking obvious signs of overdose. Sarah, then maybe it's time for the final solution, a tragic turn for the worse. These things happen with brain injuries. Marcus, how long? Sarah, Webb thinks he can make it look natural within the week. Complications from the original trauma. Very sad but not unexpected. Bradley, do it. Elena stared at the screen in horror. They were planning to kill Victor within days, and they were going to use Dr. Webb to do it. She had to act immediately. But first, she needed to get Victor out of the hospital. Elena grabbed her phone and dialed 911, then hung up before it connected. She couldn't call the police. There was no way to know which officers might be compromised, and the Blackstone family's wealth and influence could easily reach into law enforcement. She couldn't call the district attorney's office at this hour, and even if she could, it would take time to review the evidence and coordinate a response. Victor didn't have that time. Eleanor realized that she was going to have to attempt something that seemed impossible: smuggle a comatose billionaire out of one of the most secure hospitals in the city, all while avoiding detection by his own family, his doctor, and potentially corrupted security personnel. She looked at the clock. It was 2:47 a.m. Her next shift started at 11 p.m. the following day. That gave her almost 21 hours to figure out how to save Victor's life. Elena had never committed a crime in her life, but she was about to become an accomplice to kidnapping, evidence tampering, and a dozen other felonies. The alternative was to let a good man be murdered by his own family while she stood by and watched. She began to make a list of everything she would need: a way to transport Victor safely, a place to hide him while he recovered, medical equipment to monitor his condition, and most importantly, a way to contact the authorities without putting both of them at risk. It was an impossible plan with a dozen ways to fail catastrophically. But as Elena thought about Victor's desperate whisper, "Help me," she knew she had to try. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking all the rules. Elena's plan was born out of desperation and 23 years of knowing every protocol, every shift change, and every security blind spot in Memorial Hospital. It was also completely insane, which might be the only reason it could work. She had one advantage that Victor's family didn't know about. Her brother Miguel was a paramedic who moonlighted as a private medical transport driver for wealthy patients who needed discreet healthcare services. More importantly, Miguel trusted his sister completely and didn't ask questions when she needed help. Elena called Miguel at 6 a.m., knowing he would be finishing his overnight shift at the fire department. "I need a favor," she said without preamble. "A big one. And it might be dangerous." Miguel had been looking out for his older sister since they were children, and he could hear the fear in her voice. "What do you need, Elena?" "I need you to help me save someone's life tonight, and I can't explain the details until after we do it." There was a long pause. Then Miguel said, "What time?" Elena felt a surge of gratitude for her brother's unwavering loyalty. "Meet me in the Memorial Hospital parking garage, level B2 at 1 a.m. Bring the medical transport, van and enough equipment to safely move a coma patient." "Elena, what are you—" "Miguel, I swear to you this is the right thing to do. But if we get caught, we could both go to prison. So if you can't do this, I understand." Another pause. "Then I'll be there." The rest of Elena's day was a careful ballet of preparation and misdirection. She used her access to the hospital's supply rooms to gather the medical equipment she would need: portable monitors, IV supplies, medications, and a manual ventilator. She hid everything in a laundry cart and wheeled it down to the parking garage, stashing it behind a maintenance dumpster where Miguel could find it. She also made copies of Victor's medical records and the evidence from the USB drive, which she sealed in a package addressed to District Attorney Patricia Morrison. If something went wrong with the escape, at least the truth would eventually come out. The hardest part was maintaining her normal routine during her evening shift. Elena had to act like everything was normal while her heart pounded with anticipation and terror. She made her usual rounds, chatted with other nurses, and documented patient care as if this were just another night. At 12:30 a.m., Elena made one final check of Victor's condition. She whispered to him, "In 30 minutes, we're getting you out of here. Are you ready?" Victor's hand squeezed hers once. Yes, Elena had timed everything around the shift change that happened at 1 a.m. During those 15 minutes of chaos, when the night staff was briefing the overnight crew and everyone was focused on handoff reports, security would be at its most relaxed. She waited until exactly 12:55 a.m., then began to disconnect Victor from the hospital's monitoring equipment. She replaced the electronic monitors with portable, battery-powered devices that would continue to track his vital signs during transport. She switched his IV to a portable pump and made sure his airway was secure. At 1:02 a.m., Elena pushed Victor's bed out of room 314 and toward the service elevator that led to the parking garage. To anyone watching, it looked like a routine transfer. Patients were moved between floors, all the time for procedures and tests. Miguel was waiting in the garage with the medical transport van, its rear doors open and a stretcher ready. Elena had never been prouder of her brother than she was at that moment. He was risking his career and his freedom for a man he had never met, based solely on his trust in her judgment. "Is this the patient?" Miguel asked quietly as they transferred Victor from the hospital bed to the transport stretcher. "This is Victor Blackstone," Elena said. "And yes, I know how that sounds." Miguel's eyes widened, but he continued working without hesitation. Within 5 minutes, they had Victor secured in the van with all of his monitoring equipment operational. Elena climbed into the back with her patient, while Miguel got behind the wheel. "Where are we going?" Miguel asked. Elena gave him the address of a small private clinic in a rural area outside the city. The clinic was owned by Dr. Maria Santos, Elena's former supervisor and mentor, who had retired from hospital work to provide healthcare for undocumented immigrants and other patients who couldn't access traditional medical care. Elena had called Dr. Santos that afternoon and asked if she could use the clinic for a few days to care for a patient who was in a complicated situation. Dr. Santos had agreed without asking for details, trusting Elena's judgment just as Miguel had. As they drove through the empty streets, Elena monitored Victor's condition and tried to calm her nerves. They had successfully gotten him out of the hospital, but that was only the first step. Now they had to keep him safe while she figured out how to expose the conspiracy without getting them all killed. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the hospital's charge nurse. "Elena, where did Mr. Blackstone go? His room is empty and there's no transfer order." Elena's blood went cold. They had been discovered much sooner than she had anticipated. Within minutes, hospital security would be reviewing camera footage. Within an hour, Victor's family would know he was missing. "We need to hurry," she told Miguel. "They know he's gone." Miguel pressed harder on the accelerator, but they were still 20 minutes away from the clinic, and Elena was certain that police cars would be looking for the van within minutes. That's when Victor's monitor began to alarm. His heart rate was spiking, and his blood pressure was dropping rapidly. Elena quickly checked his IV and realized that one of the medications was running low, a critical drug that had been keeping his condition stable. She had enough medicine to last another hour, maybe two, but if Victor went into cardiac arrest during transport, there would be nothing she could do to save him. Elena looked down at the unconscious billionaire and whispered, "Stay with me, Victor. We're almost there." Victor's hand moved slightly, and Elena chose to interpret it as a sign that he was fighting to survive. They had come too far and risked too much to lose him now. But as sirens began to wail in the distance, Elena realized that their real challenges were just beginning. Dr. Maria Santos was 72 years old, had delivered over 3,000 babies, and had seen enough human suffering to know when someone truly needed help. When Elena arrived at the rural clinic with an unconscious billionaire and a story that sounded like a thriller novel, Dr. Santos simply rolled up her sleeves and got to work. "How long has he been conscious?" Dr. Santos asked as they transferred Victor to one of the clinic's examination rooms. Elena looked up in surprise. She hadn't mentioned Victor's awareness to anyone except Miguel, and even he didn't know the full story. "How did you—" 47 years of medicine, Dr. Santos said gently. "I can see the muscle tension patterns, the way he responds to voices even while sedated. This man is fighting to wake up, which means someone has been working very hard to keep him under." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. If Dr. Santos could see Victor's true condition, then Elena wasn't crazy. The conspiracy was real and Victor needed their help. Drugging him for 3 months, Elena explained as she connected Victor to the clinic's monitoring equipment. His own family tried to kill him, and when that failed, they've been keeping him comatose while they steal his fortune. Dr. Santos nodded grimly. "I've seen this before, unfortunately. Family members who see elderly or incapacitated relatives as nothing more than obstacles to inheritance, but never on this scale." Over the next several hours, Dr. Santos worked to gradually reduce the medications that had been keeping Victor sedated. It was a delicate process, too fast, and he could suffer seizures or other complications. Too slow, and they might not have enough time before Victor's family tracked them down. Elena had turned off her phone after the message from the hospital, but Miguel was monitoring police scanners and social media for any signs that they were being pursued. So far, there was no public indication that Victor Blackstone was missing, which suggested that his family was trying to handle the situation quietly. "That makes sense," Elena explained to Dr. Santos. "If word gets out that Victor is missing, it will raise questions about his condition and who's been making decisions for his company. They need to find him and deal with this privately." As dawn broke, Victor began to show more signs of consciousness. His eye movements became more pronounced, and he started to respond more consistently to verbal commands. Dr. Santos was amazed at how quickly his neurological function was improving once the excessive sedatives, were cleared from his system. "Elena," Dr. Santos said quietly, "this man was never in a coma from his injuries. His brain scans show some trauma consistent with the accident, but nothing that would cause prolonged unconsciousness. He's been chemically restrained this entire time." The full scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. Victor's family hadn't just been taking advantage of his medical condition, they had been artificially creating and maintaining that condition with the help of a corrupt doctor. Around 8 a.m., Victor's eyes opened for the first time in 3 months. Elena was adjusting his IV when she noticed him looking directly at her with clear, aware eyes. She nearly dropped the tubing in shock. "Mr. Blackstone, can you hear me?" Victor's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from months of intubation, but his words were crystal clear. "Elena, you saved my life." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. After months of one-way communication, hearing Victor speak was almost overwhelming. "We're not safe yet," she managed to say. "Your family is looking for you. They know you're gone." Victor nodded weakly. "The evidence. Did you find it?" "Yes, it's all there. The recordings, the financial documents, everything. I made copies and sent them to the district attorney." Victor's eyes widened. "When?" "Last night before we moved you." Victor tried to sit up, then fell back against the pillow with exhaustion. "Elena, you don't understand. Patricia Morrison, the district attorney, she's been compromised. Marcus has been paying her for years." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. If the district attorney was corrupt, then the evidence package she had sent might have already been intercepted. Worse, it would alert Victor's family to exactly how much Elena knew and what proof she had gathered. "Then who can we trust?" Elena asked desperately. Victor was quiet for a moment, gathering his strength. "There's a federal prosecutor, Agent Sarah Kim with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She's been investigating some of my company's overseas operations, but she's clean. I had her investigated thoroughly when she first approached me." Dr. Santos, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackstone, you need to rest. Your body has been through tremendous trauma, both from the accident and from months of pharmaceutical abuse. You're in no condition to—" "Doctor," Victor interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "If we don't stop them today, they will find us and finish what they started. Rest is a luxury I can't afford." Klena's phone, which she had turned back on to contact the FBI, buzzed with multiple missed calls and text messages. Most were from the hospital, but several were from numbers she didn't recognize. One text message made her blood freeze. "We know you have him. Bring him back or face the consequences. You have until noon." Victor saw her expression. "They found your phone number." "How is that possible?" "Marcus has resources you can't imagine. Private investigators, security firms, probably law enforcement contacts. They've had 3 months to prepare for contingencies." Elena looked at Dr. Santos, who was monitoring Victor's vital signs with growing concern. "Doctor, how long before he's strong enough to travel?" "Travel? Elena, this man needs at least a week of careful monitoring before—" "We don't have a week," Elena said. "We might not have until noon." Victor struggled to sit up again, and this time Dr. Santos helped him. "There's a place," he said. "A safe house that I set up years ago. Only one person knows about it besides me, and she's been dead for 5 years. "Where?" "About 3 hours north of here. It's fully equipped with medical facilities and secure communications. If we can get there, I can contact Agent Kim and arrange for federal protection while she reviews the evidence." Elena looked out the window of the rural clinic. The morning was peaceful, with no signs of pursuit, but she knew that could change at any moment. Victor's family had the resources to track them anywhere, and they had already proven they were willing to commit murder. "Miguel," Elena called to her brother, who was keeping watch by the front door. "How fast can you get us 3 hours north of here?" Miguel checked his watch. "In the medical van, maybe 2.5 hours if I push it." "But Elena, if they're monitoring traffic cameras or have people watching the roads, then we'll have to take that chance," Victor said. His voice was getting stronger, but Elena could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The man was running on pure determination. The man was running on pure determination. Dr. Santos packed medical supplies, while Elena prepared Victor for transport. As they worked, Victor continued to brief them on what they could expect. Marcus isn't just greedy, Victor explained. He's desperate. The company is in much worse financial shape than anyone knows. He's been using my signature and authorization to make increasingly risky investments, trying to cover losses from previous bad decisions. If I recover and regain control, he'll go to prison for embezzlement, even without the murder charges. What about your nephew Bradley? Bradley is worse than Marcus, because he actually believes he deserves everything I've built. In his mind, I've been an obstacle to his rightful inheritance. He won't stop until I'm dead. Elena helped Victor into the transport van, marveling at how much his condition had improved in just a few hours. The human body's resilience was remarkable, but she knew he was still fragile. Too much stress or exertion could cause a setback. That might give his family the opening they needed. As Miguel started the van, and they began the journey to Victor's safe house, Elena tried to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been a nurse doing her job. Now she was a fugitive helping a billionaire escape from his own family while carrying evidence of a murder conspiracy. Her phone buzzed with another text message. "You have 1 hour." The timeline was accelerating. Victor's family was losing patience, which made them even more dangerous. "Miguel," Elena said, "I need you to drive faster." Victor's safe house turned out to be a converted barn on a 100-acre property hidden deep in the mountains. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned farm building, but the interior had been transformed into a sophisticated command center with medical facilities, secure communications equipment, and enough supplies to last for weeks. "I bought this place 10 years ago," Victor explained, as Elena helped him to a hospital-style bed that had been installed in one of the rooms. "After the third attempt on my life, which I thought was the first at the time, I realized I needed somewhere to disappear if necessary." Elena stared around the facility in amazement. There were multiple computer workstations, satellite communication equipment, medical monitors, and even a small surgical suite. Victor hadn't just been paranoid about his family's intentions. He had been preparing for this day for years. "How many attempts on your life were there?" Elena asked as she connected Victor to the monitoring equipment. "7 that I know of for certain. Probably more that I didn't recognize at the time." Victor's voice was growing stronger, but Elena could see the pain in his eyes. "It's hard to accept that the people you love most in the world want you dead." Miguel was setting up a perimeter security system that Victor had designed, using motion sensors and cameras to monitor all approaches to the property. Dr. Santos was reviewing the medical equipment and preparing medications. That would help Victor continue his recovery. Elena sat down next to Victor's bed with the laptop that contained all the evidence from the USB drive. "Before we contact the FBI, I need to understand something. How were you gathering new evidence while you were unconscious in the hospital?" Victor managed a weak smile. "I was never completely unconscious, Elena. The medications kept me sedated and unable to move, but I could hear everything. Every conversation Marcus had in my room, every phone call, every discussion about their plans. I've been aware for months, trapped in my own body, listening to my family plan my murder." The horror of what Victor had endured hit Elena like a physical blow. That's torture." "It was," Victor agreed, "but it also gave me something they didn't expect: complete knowledge of their conspiracy. I know every detail of their plan, every person involved, every crime they've committed." Elena opened the laptop and began reviewing the evidence files again, this time with Victor's commentary. As he explained the context behind each document and recording, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Marcus hadn't just been stealing from the company. He had been systematically bankrupting it while moving assets to offshore accounts. Bradley wasn't just a greedy heir. He had been actively involved in planning. Bradley wasn't just a greedy heir. He had been actively involved in planning Victor's death and had personally hired the mechanic who sabotaged the car. Sarah Chen, the personal assistant, had been forging Victor's signature on legal documents for over a year, essentially allowing the family to control his entire fortune while he lay helpless. Dr. Webb was perhaps the most disturbing piece of the puzzle. He hadn't just been keeping Victor sedated, he had been slowly poisoning him with a combination of drugs designed to cause permanent brain damage. The plan was to eventually let Victor wake up as a mentally incapacitated shell of his former self, making it easy for the family to have him declared incompetent and assume permanent control of his affairs. They were going to let you live but destroy your mind? Elena asked, horrified. Until this week, yes. But something changed. They decided that even a brain-damaged Victor was too risky to keep alive. Elena thought about the intercepted communications she had read. They were worried that people were starting to ask questions about your recovery timeline. Exactly. 3 months in a coma after a car accident is plausible. 6 months would start to raise suspicions. They needed to either kill me or let me wake up, and letting me wake up was never really an option. Victor's phone, which had been secured in the safe house's communication system, chimed with an encrypted message. Victor checked the display and his face went pale. "What is it?" Elena asked. "It's from Agent Kim at the FBI. She's been trying to reach me for 2 days. Apparently, someone sent evidence of a conspiracy to the district attorney's office, and D.A. Morrison immediately forwarded it to my brother Marcus." Elena felt sick. "So they know everything we have on them." "Worse than that. According to Agent Kim, D.A. Morrison has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of kidnapping and endangering a patient. Marcus is claiming that you've stolen me from the hospital against medical advice and that I'm not competent to make decisions about my own care." The trap was closing around them. Victor's family had turned Elena from a whistleblower into a criminal, and now they had legal authority to hunt her down. Miguel, who had been monitoring police scanners, confirmed Elena's worst fears. There are units heading this way. Multiple agencies, including state police and FBI. ETA may be 20 minutes. Dr. Santos looked up from the medical equipment she had been preparing. "Elena, you need to run. Take Miguel and go. Victor and I can handle this when the authorities arrive." "No," Victor said firmly. "If they take me back into Marcus's custody, I'll be dead within 24 hours. And Elena will be charged with kidnapping a man who is supposedly mentally incompetent. We have to prove the conspiracy before they find us." Elena's mind raced through their options. They had minutes, not hours, to expose the truth. The evidence was compelling, but it would take time for investigators to verify, and Victor's family had already demonstrated their ability to manipulate law enforcement. That's when Elena remembered something Victor had said earlier. "You said you've been aware this whole time, hearing every conversation. Do you have recordings of what they said in your hospital room?" Victor's eyes lit up. "The hospital's security system. I had special audio recording equipment installed in my room years ago as a security precaution. Everything that happened in that room for the past 3 months is recorded on encrypted servers. Can we access those recordings from here?" "Yes." "But—" Victor paused as the sound of helicopters became audible in the distance. "We're out of time." Elena made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She grabbed the laptop with all the evidence and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Miguel called after her. "To meet them head-on," Elena said. "If we run, we look guilty. If we hide, they'll assume Victor is being held against his will. Our only chance is to present the evidence directly to Agent Kim before anyone else can spin the story." Victor struggled to sit up. "Elena, that's incredibly dangerous. If Agent Kim isn't there, or if she's been compromised, then we're finished anyway," Elena said. "But if she's honest, and if we can get her to listen to the recordings, we can end this." Dr. Santos stood up. "I'm going with you." "Doctor, you don't need to—" "Elena, I've been practicing medicine for 47 years. I know the difference between a patient who needs protection and one who is being kidnapped. Victor is clearly competent and clearly in danger from his own family. If we're going to expose this conspiracy, we need medical testimony to prove that he was being deliberately over-medicated." Miguel grabbed his keys. If you're both going, then I'm driving. Elena looked back at Victor, who was watching her with an expression of profound gratitude and concern. Stay alive, she told him. Whatever happens, stay alive until we can get this evidence to the right people. Victor nodded. Elena, if this goes wrong, if they arrest you or something happens to me, promise me. You'll make sure the truth comes out. Don't let them win. I promise, Elena said. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Elena realized that the next few minutes would determine not just Victor's fate, but the fate of everyone who had tried to help him. They were about to gamble everything on the hope that there was at least one honest law enforcement officer in the group that was approaching. The helicopters were getting closer, and Elena could see dust clouds on the horizon that indicated vehicles approaching on the mountain road. It was time to find out whether justice was stronger than corruption, and whether the truth was more powerful than billions of dollars. Elena walked out of the safe house with her hands raised, carrying the laptop with all the evidence clearly visible. Dr. Santos and Miguel flanked her, also with their hands up, as 3 helicopters circled overhead and a convoy of law enforcement vehicles crested the hill. The lead vehicle was an unmarked sedan that Elena hoped belonged to Agent Kim. Behind it came state police cruisers, an ambulance, and what looked like a SWAT vehicle. The show of force was overwhelming, clearly designed to intimidate. Elena stood in the middle of the dirt road and waited as officers poured out of the vehicles, weapons drawn and pointed in her direction. She forced herself to remain calm, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger a catastrophic response. A woman in a dark suit emerged from the unmarked sedan and approached with her badge clearly visible. Agent Sarah Kim, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Are you Elena Rodriguez? Yes, Elena called back. I'm the one who needs to speak with you about Victor Blackstone. Ms. Rodriguez, you're under arrest for kidnapping and endangering a patient. You have the right to— Agent Kim! Elena interrupted, knowing she might only have seconds before she was restrained. Victor Blackstone is conscious and competent. He's been chemically sedated for 3 months by his own family while they steal his fortune. Everything is recorded and I have proof. Agent Kim paused, her hand on her service weapon. Elena could see her processing the information, trying to decide whether Elena was a criminal or a whistleblower. Where is Mr. Blackstone now? Agent Kim asked. Inside the building, under medical supervision. Agent Kim, his brother Marcus tried to have him killed, and when that failed, they've been keeping him drugged and unconscious. You need to see the evidence before anyone else gets to him. Elena held up the laptop. It's all here. Recorded conversations, financial documents, proof of the sabotage that caused his accident. But his family has corrupted local law enforcement, including the district attorney. You may be the only honest official involved in this case. Agent Kim looked uncertain, which Elena chose to interpret as a good sign. A corrupt agent would have already arrested her without listening to any explanations. Agent Kim, Dr. Santos called out. I'm Dr. Maria Santos, a licensed physician with 47 years of experience. I've been treating Mr. Blackstone since last night, and I can medically verify that he is conscious, competent, and has been the victim of deliberate pharmaceutical abuse. That seemed to get Agent Kim's attention. She lowered her weapon and approached closer, though other officers kept Elena in their sights. Dr. Santos, what's your assessment of Mr. Blackstone's condition? He was never in a coma from his accident injuries, Dr. Santos said firmly. He's been kept sedated through a combination of drugs that served no medical purpose. As soon as we reduced those medications, he regained consciousness and demonstrated full cognitive function. Elena could see Agent Kim weighing the information. Even if that's true, Ms. Rodriguez removed him from a hospital against medical advice and without proper authorization. That's still kidnapping. Agent Kim, Elena said desperately. If I hadn't removed him, he would be dead right now. His family was planning to kill him this week. The evidence is all on this laptop, including recordings they made in his hospital room. Elena was about to continue when she heard Victor's voice from behind her. Agent Kim, thank you for coming. Elena turned to see Victor walking slowly out of the safe house, supported by a walking frame, but clearly alert and in control. The transformation from the unconscious patient she had been caring for just days ago was remarkable. Agent Kim stared at Victor in shock. "Mr. Blackstone, sir, we were told you were incapacitated and being held against your will." "Agent Kim, I've been trying to reach you for 3 months," Victor said, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "My brother and nephew hired someone to sabotage my car and cause the accident that nearly killed me. When I survived, they conspired with my doctor to keep me unconscious while they systematically stole my fortune." Victor gestured toward Elena. "Ms. Rodriguez saved my life by discovering their plan and helping me escape. Everything she's told you is true, and I can provide evidence of crimes including attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." Agent Kim looked around at the other officers, clearly struggling with a situation that was far more complex than she had anticipated. "So, with respect, we have medical reports indicating that you suffered severe brain trauma and may not be competent to make decisions about your own care. Those medical reports were falsified by Dr. Harrison Webb, who was being paid by my family to keep me sedated," Victor replied. "Dr. Santos can provide independent medical verification of my condition, and the recordings from my hospital room will prove that I've been conscious and aware throughout this ordeal." Elena held up the laptop again. "Agent Kim, you just need to listen to one recording, just one, and you'll understand that we're telling the truth." Agent Kim looked around at her team, then back at Victor. Elena could see her making a calculation about risk and responsibility. 5 minutes, Agent Kim said finally. "I'll give you 5 minutes to show me what you have. But, Mr. Blackstone, if you are being coerced in any way—" "Agent Kim, the only coercion I've experienced has been from my own family," Victor said. "Please listen to the evidence." Elena opened the laptop and quickly located one of the most damning recordings, a conversation between Marcus and Bradley discussing the timeline for Victor's death. As Agent Kim listened to Victor's brother and nephew casually discussing murder, Elena watched her expression change from skepticism to horror to grim determination. When the recording ended, Agent Kim looked up at Victor with a mixture of apology and anger. "Mr. Blackstone, I think we need to have a much longer conversation, and I think we need to take you and everyone who helped you into federal protective custody while we sort this out." Elena felt a wave of relief so intense that her legs nearly gave out. They had done it. Agent Kim believed them. But before anyone could move, the sound of approaching vehicles made everyone turn toward the road. A convoy of black SUVs was speeding toward them, and Elena had a sinking feeling that Victor's family had just arrived to take control of the situation. "Agent Kim," Victor said urgently, "whatever happens in the next few minutes, don't let them take me back. If I go into my family's custody, I'll never live to testify." The lead SUV screeched to a halt, and Marcus Blackstone stepped out, flanked by a team of private security personnel. Elena realized that the real confrontation was just beginning. Marcus Blackstone stepped out of his SUV with the confident air of a man accustomed to getting his way through money and influence. He was impeccably dressed, despite the rural setting, flanked by what were clearly expensive private security contractors, and carrying a briefcase that undoubtedly contained legal documents designed to regain custody of his brother. "Agent Kim," Marcus called out as he approached, "thank you for recovering my brother. As you can see, he's clearly disoriented and needs immediate medical attention." Victor stepped forward, his voice clear and strong. "Hello, Marcus. Still trying to have me killed, I see." The shock on Marcus's face was unmistakable, quickly replaced by a calculated attempt at concern. "Victor, thank God you're alive. We've been so worried about you. Dr. Webb said you might experience confusion and paranoia as you recovered from your injuries." "Is that what Dr. Webb told you?" Victor replied. "The same Dr. Webb who's been poisoning me for 3 months on your orders?" Elena watched the exchange with fascination. Victor had spent 3 months listening to his family plot against him, and now he was finally able to confront them directly. Marcus turned to Agent Kim. Agent, as you can see, my brother is experiencing severe psychological effects from his trauma. We have legal guardianship documents and medical authorization to take him into protective care. Agent Kim looked at the briefcase Marcus was carrying, then back at Victor. Mr. Marcus Blackstone, I'm going to need to see those documents. But first, I think you should know that we've been reviewing evidence of some very serious allegations. What kind of allegations? Marcus asked, though Eleanor could see the concern creeping into his expression. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. For starters, Agent Kim replied, your brother has provided us with extensive documentation of a conspiracy to kill him and steal his fortune. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. Agent Kim, surely you can see that Victor is not in his right mind. He's obviously been influenced by this woman, he gestured dismissively toward Elena, who kidnapped him from his medical care for reasons we can only guess at. That's when Elena heard a voice she recognized from the recordings. Marcus, what's taking so long? Bradley Blackstone emerged from one of the SUVs, followed by Sarah Chen and, to Eleanor's shock, Dr. Harrison Webb himself. Victor saw Dr. Webb and his face hardened. Interesting that you brought the doctor who's been trying to kill me, Marcus. Agent Kim, Dr. Webb has been administering a cocktail of unnecessary sedatives designed to keep me unconscious and eventually cause permanent brain damage. Dr. Webb stepped forward with professional authority. Agent, I'm Mr. Blackstone's personal physician, and I can assure you that he's experiencing severe psychological trauma from his accident. The medications I prescribed were medically necessary to prevent seizures and manage his brain injury. Is that so? Agent Kim asked. She turned to Dr. Santos. Doctor, what's your medical opinion? Dr. Santos faced Dr. Webb directly. Dr. Webb, you prescribed dosages of benzodiazepines and barbiturates that were 3 times higher than any accepted protocol for traumatic brain injury. You also administered paralytic agents that served no therapeutic purpose except to prevent voluntary movement. In my professional opinion, you are deliberately keeping Mr. Blackstone chemically restrained. Dr. Webb's face flushed. Dr. Santos, I don't know what credentials you think you have, but 47 years in emergency medicine and neurology. Dr. Santos replied calmly, and unlike you, I've never been paid to harm my patients. Elena could see the dynamic shifting. Marcus and his team had arrived expecting to find Victor incapacitated and Elena under arrest. Instead, they were facing federal agents who had already heard evidence of their crimes. Agent Kim opened Elena's laptop and turned the screen toward Marcus. Mr. Blackstone, would you like to explain this recording of you discussing the timeline for your brother's murder? As Marcus heard his own voice discussing Victor's death, his composure finally cracked. Eleanor saw him exchange glances with Bradley and Dr. Webb, and she realized they were calculating whether they could still salvage the situation. That recording is obviously fabricated, Marcus said. Though his voice lacked conviction, Victor has been unconscious for months. How could he have recorded anything? Because I wasn't unconscious. You bastard, Victor said, his voice carrying months of suppressed rage. I heard every word you said in my hospital room, every plan you made, every crime you committed, every lie you told. I've been awake and aware while you've been torturing me and stealing from me. The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena could see him realizing that if Victor had been conscious, then he had witnessed and could testify to everything. Bradley stepped forward, pulling out his phone. We need to call our lawyers. This is obviously some kind of setup. Bradley, Victor said quietly. You might want to think very carefully about what you do next. Agent Kim now has recordings of you hiring the mechanic who sabotaged my car, financial records showing payments to corrupt officials, and documentation of your plans to murder me. The only question is whether you're going to make this worse by continuing to lie. Eleanor watched as the weight of their situation finally dawned on Victor's family. They had built their conspiracy on the assumption that Victor would never be able to testify against them. Now they were facing a victim who had heard and remembered everything. Agent Kim stepped forward with handcuffs. Marcus Blackstone, Bradley Blackstone, Dr. Harrison Webb and Sarah Chen, you're all under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, and a variety of federal crimes. You have the right to remain silent. As Agent Kim read them their rights, Elena felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. So after months of watching Victor suffer in silence, justice was finally being served. But the most powerful moment came when Agent Kim turned to Elena and said, "Ms. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. What you did was technically illegal, but it was also incredibly brave. You saved this man's life and exposed a conspiracy that would have succeeded if you hadn't acted." Elena looked at Victor, who was watching his family being arrested, with a mixture of sadness and relief. "Victor," Elena said quietly, "are you all right?" Victor turned to her with tears in his eyes. "Elena, you gave me back my life. You risked everything to save someone you barely knew. I don't know how I can ever repay that." Elena smiled. "Just get better, and maybe use your second chance to do some good in the world." Victor nodded. "I promise you I will." Epilogue 6 months later. Helena stood in the lobby of the newly opened Blackstone Foundation Medical Center, watching as Victor cut the ribbon for the facility's grand opening. The center was designed specifically to provide advanced medical care for patients without insurance and to train nurses and doctors in recognizing signs of medical abuse. In the 6 months since the arrests, Victor had made a remarkable recovery. The physical effects of his accident had largely healed, and the psychological trauma of his family's betrayal was being addressed through therapy and his commitment to using his wealth for humanitarian purposes. Marcus, Bradley, Dr. Webb, and Sarah had all been convicted on federal charges. Marcus and Bradley were serving 20-year sentences for attempted murder and conspiracy. Dr. Webb had lost his medical license and was serving 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. Sarah had cooperated with prosecutors and received a reduced sentence of 5 years. The Blackstone Industries Board had unanimously voted to restructure the company under Victor's leadership, with new oversight mechanisms designed to prevent the kind of corruption that had nearly destroyed both Victor and the business. Eleanor had been honored by the American Nurses Association for her courage in exposing the conspiracy, but she remained humble about her role. "I just did what any nurse should do," she told reporters. "I advocated for my patient." Victor approached Elena after the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "How does it feel to see the first patients being admitted to a facility that exists because of your courage?" Elena watched as families brought their loved ones into the medical center, knowing they would receive the same quality of care regardless of their ability to pay. "It feels like your mother would be proud," Elena said. "She raised a son who knows how to do the right thing, even when it's difficult." Victor smiled. "Elena, I have something to ask you. The foundation is looking for a director of patient advocacy, someone who can ensure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Would you consider taking the job?" Eleanor looked around at the medical center, at the patients and families who would benefit from the care provided here, and at Victor, whose second chance at life had become a gift to countless others. "I'd be honored," Elena said. As they watched the first patients being admitted to the Blackstone Foundation Medical Center, Elena reflected on how a whispered plea for help had changed both their lives forever. Sometimes the most powerful force in the world isn't money or influence. It's simply one person willing to listen when someone asks for help. Victor Blackstone had been declared dead by his own family, but his nurse had heard the truth. And that truth had set them both free. He's a single millionaire dad, living a life most people only dream about. But tonight everything changes. He's stepping into uncharted territory, a blind date, with his twins by his side. She has no idea who he really is, and what starts as a simple evening quickly turns into something unforgettable. Expect laughter, awkward moments, surprises, and a story that will keep you glued to the screen until the very end. You won't believe how one night can turn a life upside down.